They went on a hike to test their endurance. 5 men and 1 woman. She was married. She loved her husband, but fate decided otherwise. This is a real story about how, far from civilization, in the frozen captivity of the mountains, human laws ceased to apply. A story about how a woman, who belonged to one man, became common to all, except for him. To understand how the dream of romance turned into a real-life nightmare, we must return to the beginning, when the sun still shone, and hearts were full of hope. The air in their small Moscow apartment was dense and sweet, like melted honey. The sun's rays streamed through the blinds, drawing bizarre patterns on the floor. Andrei, with his eyes burning, almost like a little boy, was tightening the straps of a huge canvas backpack. Marina. Just imagine. No car noise, none of the city. Just us and the mountains, majestic, silent. It's, like touching eternity. The air there is different. You breathe it and it's like you're cleansed. We'll hike the passes, we'll drink water from glacial streams. It's a real test. After something like this, people change. They become better, purer. Marina sat on the sofa, watching him with a smile. She was carefully folding a warm sweater into her backpack, which was still almost empty. She did not share his fanatical enthusiasm for the wilderness. Mountains, streams, passes. All of this was just beautiful scenery to her. The main thing was that they would be together, the 2 of them, far from everyone. I believe you, my dear. The main thing is that you are by my side. And with you, I'll be fine on a mountain or even on the moon. Just let's take more chocolate. For purity of the soul, I need chocolate. He laughed, came over and kissed her. We'll take everything, and chocolate, and condensed milk. It will be the best adventure of our lives. You'll see. The train station was buzzing like a disturbed hive. The clatter of wheels, the announcer's voice, laughter, shouts, the smell of coal and road dust. Their friends, Sergei and Pavel, were already waiting on the platform. 2 ordinary city boys, as romantic and amateurish as Andrei, but they were not alone. Next to them stood 2 others, completely different. One was gloomy and silent. The second one caught the eye. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the confident, calm face of a man who feels in charge everywhere. He moved smoothly, spoke quietly, but everyone listened to him. It was Victor. Andrei, Marina, hello. Meet Victor and his partner, Igor. Experienced guys. They've crossed all of Siberia on foot. We definitely won't get lost with them. Andrei extended his hand to Victor, but he didn't seem to notice. His sharp, appraising gaze swept over Marina from head to toe. He looked at her not as a woman, but as a thoroughbred horse, assessing her build and stamina. Only after that did he lazily shake Andrei's hand, and then Sergei's. Sergei, I told you, no dead weight on a serious hike, and you brought a whole jewel. Beautiful, of course, can't argue with that. But in the mountains, beauty is extra weight. Watch out the bears don't take a liking to her. They have an eye for shiny things, and in the mountains, there are its own laws. There's no prosecutor. He said this with a wide, disarming smile, but in his eyes there was no trace of mirth. Andrei felt a cold chill run down his spine. He tried to joke. Well, we'll defend ourselves from bears somehow. The important thing is that the people are good. His voice sounded unsure, almost pathetic. Victor laughed loudly, slapping Sergei on the shoulder, and this laughter completely drowned out Andrei's weak attempt to preserve his dignity. The first week of the hike was hard, but happy. The majestic beauty of the mountains was breathtaking. By day they walked on narrow paths, and in the evenings they sat by the fire, played the guitar, and watched the stars, huge and close, like scattered diamonds. But with each day, Andrei felt more and more useless. Victor had completely assumed the role of leader. He decided where to set up camp, how to divide the supplies, which path to take. He did everything easily, confidently, as if he had been born with a backpack on. Andrei was simply Marina's husband. Victor constantly, though as if by chance, highlighted his incompetence. He would correct a knot on his rope, or take the axe from his hand with the words, "Give it here, Professor, or you'll lose your fingers." And the pinnacle was when, seeing Marina breathing heavily under the weight of her backpack, he silently took the burden from her, threw it on his own shoulder, and tossed a comment at Andrei. Treasures must be protected, not loaded like a donkey. And so, on the 7th day, they reached it. The old suspension bridge over a raging mountain river. The bridge looked terrifying. Sagging cables, rotten planks. Below, in the narrow gorge, the icy water foamed and crashed against the rocks. "It's nothing. We'll cross one by one," Victor said calmly. "I'm first. I'll check it, then you cross one by one. Andrei, you and your lady go last, so you don't create a panic if something happens." It took an eternity to cross the bridge. It swayed underfoot like a swing. The planks creaked and bent. When the last of the group, Andrei and Marina, stepped onto firm ground on the other side, Andrei turned to wave victoriously at his friends. At that moment, there was a deafening, dry crack, like a gunshot. One of the load-bearing cables, worn thin against the rock, snapped with a wild shriek. The bridge jerked, tilted, and with a powerful roar, dragging tons of rock and earth with it, collapsed into the churning abyss. For a few seconds, absolute silence fell, broken only by the roar of the water. 6 people stood on one bank, staring at the chasm that had just cut them off from the rest of the world. The feeling of ecstasy and victory was replaced by a cold, sticky dread. Their adventure had just ended. Survival was beginning. We don't know how long they stood on the edge of that chasm. 1 hour, 2. Time had lost its value. They were all paralyzed by terror. Then, as if waking from a daze, Victor spoke loudly and distinctly. "Stop panicking. You're whimpering here. These are the mountains, not kindergarten. Things happen, and whoever isn't prepared, it's their own fault. There are other options. There should be a winter shelter about 10 kilometers from here. An old hunting cabin, I know it. We'll stay there until spring. We should be able to reach people." He wasn't asking, he was announcing. His voice was harsh and confident. He said, "We will find, not, we will search," as if he himself were that will, that path. "Gather your things, quickly, we're splitting up. Igor and I go ahead, check the path, the rest follow us. Nobody falls behind, nobody loses sight of the person in front. The main thing is discipline, and discipline in the mountains means life. Understood?" His words didn't calm them, but they snapped them back to reality. Fear gave way to the animalistic instinct of submission to the strong. They stood up in silence and trailed after him, like sheep after a ram. Victor immediately took command, and no one dared to comment. Andrei just squeezed Marina's hand tighter, feeling even more helpless. He was a professor, a scholar, not a survivor. The trek was difficult. The snow grew deeper, the wind intensified, the frost bit to the bone. The entire group moved slowly, gasping for air. And once again, Marina was the center of attention. The only woman in this pack of men. "Marina, let me carry your backpack," Sergei offered. His face was red from the cold and exertion. "You're tired anyway." "No, Seryoja, thank you, I can handle it." "You call this handling it?" Victor intervened. He quickly caught up, took Marina's backpack from her, and without a word, threw it over his own shoulder. "You, Professor, still have to keep your wife warm. You'll need your strength, and her burden must be carried by the strong one. Or maybe you, Andrei, don't need a wife at all." Andrei felt his face burn. He mumbled something about, "I can manage on my own." But Victor had already moved ahead, paying him no attention. Marina just looked at him in silence. In her gaze, there was no reproach, but there was a cold tinge of regret. For the first time in many years, Andrei felt he wasn't just weak, he was nothing. A few hours later, they stumbled upon the cabin. It was a log structure, half buried in snow, with a hole in the roof and boarded-up windows. But it was shelter. It was life. Victor threw the backpacks on the floor. "We divide the spots. Igor and I are here, by the stove. That's what's fair. You, Andrei, with your lady, over there, by the wall. The wind doesn't blow as hard there. The rest of you, wherever you want." It was cold and damp inside the cabin. The stove hadn't been lit in a long time. They had to break ice off the walls. While Andrei and Marina were carrying water and trying to light the stove, Victor and Igor had already occupied the best spots, laying out their sleeping bags. Sergei and Pavel, though they were Andrei's friends, silently occupied the remaining corners, avoiding his gaze. The law of the taiga had already begun to take effect. and Andrei was on the lowest rung of this hierarchy. After lighting the stove, they could finally get warm. Victor pulled a bottle of spirit and a piece of dried meat from his backpack. "Well, men, to survival?" He raised his mug. "To us, for not breaking." Everyone drank, except for Andrei. He sat huddled, hugging Marina, who was trembling from cold and fatigue. "Victor," Andrei said quietly, "Marina is very cold. Maybe she could sit closer to the stove?" Victor lazily turned his gaze toward him. "So? Then warm her yourself. You're a man, aren't you? Or are you not anymore? In the mountains, Andrei, everything is simple. Whoever is stronger sits closer to the fire. Got it? And your job is to provide warmth for your woman however you can." The dialogue was interrupted by Igor. "Victor, remember in 81 in Altai? I was with you then too. We had 2 women with us, the cook and the doctor, young, local. They couldn't handle it. They started with that female nonsense, hysterics. At first they seemed to hold on, but then—" He fell silent, looking meaningfully at Marina. "And then what?" asked Pavel, who had become curious. "Then one, the cook, started pretending to be sick. First her leg hurt, then her head. But really she was just faking it to get attention. The expedition leader, an old man, fell for her, and that's how it went. First, he gave her the best portions, then he moved her into his tent, said it was warmer. And then—" Igor paused, as if savoring the attention. Marina was listening, her eyes fixed on him. And then she turned out to be the only one in the tent camp who wasn't sick. The whole team was down with colds, but the cook was healthy. The chief tried so hard that even the doctor started taking care of her. But her happiness didn't last long. In the spring, when the helicopter came, she was the most tormented. Something broke in her. And the doctor never came back. They said she ran away. Victor, do you remember what you were telling us about the girl in the cabin? Sergei asked Victor. The one who got stuck with the hunters. Victor snorted, pulling out his tobacco pouch. Ah, that girl was young, stupid, begged the hunters to take her for a season, believed in the romance of the taiga, and there were 6 men there. Yes, the winter is long, food is scarce, spirit is plentiful. Well, in short, she quickly understood what woman's work means in the wild. At first, she cried, pleaded. Then she stopped. She didn't refuse work, silently did everything she was told. Only her eyes became completely empty, like a trapped animal's. In the spring, they pulled her out of there barely alive, silent. And she never returned home. She left, they say she became a nun, to forget everything. These stories, told with such casual nonchalance, chilled you to the bone. Marina tried not to show it, but she felt everything inside her grow cold. She looked at Andrei. He was sitting huddled and wouldn't look up. The first night in the cabin proved to be a real test. The blizzard had truly set in. The wind howled in the chimney like a hungry wolf. It seemed the hut was about to fall apart. The frost was terrible. Andrei and Marina got the coldest spot by the wall. Andrei tried to embrace Marina, to press her to his chest, to warm her somehow. But his hugs were weak, and his body trembled not only from the cold, but from fear. I can't, Marina. I can't keep you warm. At that moment, as if hearing his words, Victor, who was lying on the bunk by the stove, spoke loudly, for all to hear, drawing out his words. Well, Romeo, you won't warm her like that. You need manly warmth here. Real warmth, not from books. The mountains are no place for tender hugs. Here, everything is simple. If you can't do it yourself, give your spot to someone who can. Otherwise, you'll both freeze to death this winter. His words were like a blow with a sledgehammer of ice. Andrei felt Marina tense in his arms. He looked at her. In her eyes, there was no desperation. In them, there was a cold, unambiguous thought, the thought of survival. The dark hut, smelling of dampness and smoke. Andrei is on his knees, not on one, but on both, like a guilty slave. His hands are clasped in a pleading gesture. Before him, towering like a rock, stands Victor. In his hand, a mug of spirit gleams faintly. Please, no. Just not her. Take anything you want. Take my food, my clothes. Just don't touch her. Victor looks down on him, for a long time, with disgusted curiosity, like an entomologist at a rare but repulsive insect. He takes a sip, and lazily drawing out the words, replies, "Well, I am taking what I want." To understand how Andrei got to this point, we must go back a few weeks, to the first days after the bridge collapse. 2 weeks, 2 endless weeks of icy captivity. The initial shock had passed, replaced by the dull, exhausting routine of survival. The days resembled one another. A short, gray dawn, chopping wood, the meager portion of food, the long, dark evening by the stove, and the restless sleep disturbed by the wind. The food was disappearing before their eyes. Canned goods, grains, hardtack. Everything was strictly rationed by Victor and distributed in miserable portions. Hunger was a constant companion. It made people angry, irritable. The romance of the hike had evaporated without a trace. All that remained was the fight for calories. "Well, master, that's all for today. The last can of meat is gone. Tomorrow we're on dry rations." It was Sergei, Andrei's former friend, addressing Victor. Now everyone called Victor master or commander. It had happened on its own. "Don't whimper, Seryoga. Tomorrow Igor and I will go check the snares. Maybe some sinful rabbit fell into one. And you all here, prepare more wood and melt water. You need to work, not complain." Andrei sat in the darkest corner. He felt completely useless. He didn't know how to set snares, and he couldn't split a log in one blow, as Victor did. He was a professor, a man of words, not deeds. And in this new world his words were worthless. He saw how the attitude toward him was changing. Contempt, at first hidden, then more and more obvious. But the most frightening thing was Marina's gaze. In it, there was no longer love and admiration, only exhaustion and fear. She looked at him like a weak, sick animal, dragging the whole pack down. And he decided he had to do something, to prove to her, to prove to everyone that he wasn't dead weight. "Victor," he said, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "I know where there might be more snares. An old hunting post. I marked it on the map. Let me go. I'll be back quickly." Victor sized him up with a mocking gaze. "You? In the forest? Alone? The first squirrel will eat you, Professor. Sit down and don't move." "But here," Marina intervened. "Let him go," she said quietly but firmly. "He has to." Victor looked at her in surprise, then back at Andrei, and snorted. "Well, look at that. If the missus gives you permission, go ahead. Just take the map and compass, and if you're not back in 3 hours, we'll write you off as a loss to natural selection." Andrei felt a sting of humiliation, but also a surge of gratitude toward Marina. She believed in him. He had to justify her trust. He gathered himself quickly, took the old map, the compass, and went out into the blinding white of the winter day. The forest met him with hostile silence. The wind howled through the bare branches. The snow blinded him. He walked, sinking to his knees, checking the map. He was so focused on his goal that he didn't notice the treacherous route, covered by snow. He tripped and fell face first into a snowdrift. Getting up and brushing himself off, he realized the breast pocket of his jacket was unbuttoned. He froze, fumbled with his hand. Empty. The map and compass were gone. Panic seized his throat. He dropped to his knees, began to dig through the snow with his hands. In vain. The fresh, loose snow was like cotton wool. It had swallowed his only hope. He searched for 1 hour, 2. His hands grew numb from the cold. He could no longer feel his fingers. Despair was replaced by horror. He realized he hadn't just failed the mission. He had committed a crime. He returned to the cabin after dark, alone, empty-handed. He entered, and everyone sitting by the stove turned. In their eyes was a silent question. Andrei couldn't utter a word. He just stood there, head bowed, as the snow melted from his hair and eyelashes, running in dirty streams down his face. "What's with the long face, Professor?" Victor asked venomously. "Find the treasure. Where's the loot? Or at least the map and compass?" I lost them," Andrei whispered. "What?" Victor roared, jumping to his feet. "What did you say?" "I fell. They fell in the snow. I couldn't find them." The air in the cabin vibrated with tension. Even the crackling of the wood in the stove seemed to fall silent. Victor slowly approached Andrei. So, this intellectual, he spat the words like poison. This city slicker just cost us our last chance of orientation. Now we're blind kittens in this icy hell. I pose a question to the collective. What are we going to do with the dead weight, the burden that is intentionally dragging us all to the bottom? He scanned everyone with a heavy gaze. Sergei and Pavel, his friends, stared at the floor. They didn't dare look up. Their silence was more terrifying than any accusation. Andrei looked at Marina. She was looking at him, but in her gaze there was no pity, only cold calculation and fear. She looked at him as the cause of her future demise. Victor concluded his impromptu trial. He, slowly swaying, approached Marina. He stopped right in front of her, his huge shadow looming over her. The whole cabin held its breath. "Your husband is a burden," he said quietly, almost intimately, but loud enough for all to hear. He made a mistake for which, in other circumstances, he would simply be left in the forest. But I'm not a bloodthirsty man. I'm ready to forgive his mistake. He paused, savoring the effect. In exchange for a single, prophylactic discussion with you. In private. His voice had become syrupy, like a snake's hiss. "You're a smart woman, Marina. You understand everything. You don't want your husband to accidentally get lost in the next blizzard, do you?" Silence. The only sound in the cramped, frozen hut was the hissing and crackling of wet logs in the stove. Victor's words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. "You don't want your husband to accidentally get lost in the next blizzard, do you?" It wasn't a question. It was a fact. A contract laid on the table. Andrei looked at Marina, his eyes screaming a silent plea. "No! Please, no!" But he knew it was useless. He had lost. He had brought this upon them. The weight of his mistake was crushing, leaving no room for pride or protest. Marina was not looking at him. She was looking past him, at the roughly hewn log wall, at the dancing shadows, at the bleak future that was now their only reality. Something inside her, something soft and hopeful that had survived the collapsed bridge and the biting cold, finally broke. The romantic girl who had packed chocolate in her backpack was gone. In her place stood a woman staring into the abyss. She stood up slowly, deliberately. Her movements were smooth, almost regal, as if a queen were accepting the terms of surrender that would save her kingdom. Without a single word, without honoring her husband with even a fleeting glance, she turned and walked toward the small, dark opening that led to the other room, Victor's room. The moment was surreal. No one moved, no one breathed, as if they were all watching a play, a grim and inevitable tragedy unfolding before their eyes. Victor grinned. His lips curled slowly, triumphantly. He took another sip from his mug, then followed her, pulling the makeshift animal skin curtain closed behind him. The sound of the curtain being drawn was like the blade of a guillotine. It severed Andrei's last link to the world he knew. He leaped to his feet, a strangled, animalistic sound escaping his throat. "No!" He rushed toward the opening, but an iron grip seized his shoulder. It was Sergei, his friend. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Don't you dare, Andrei, don't be an idiot. He'll bury us all here. Sit down, for God's sake, sit down." Sergei's words, whispered, hit Andrei with the force of a physical blow. He froze, his body trembling. He looked at the other faces in the firelight. Pavel, his other friend, was staring intently at the floor, as if trying to drill a hole in it with his gaze. Igor, Victor's silent partner, was calmly sharpening a knife, and a faint, cruel smile played on his lips. There was no help here, no compassion, only fear and the primitive understanding of the law of power. Andrei backed away from the doorway as if from a fire. He sank back into his spot by the cold wall, clutching his head in his hands. And then he heard it. The creak of the bunk, Victor's confident, muffled voice, Marina's quiet, indistinct reply. He covered his ears, but the sound seeped through, drilling into his brain. He began to rock back and forth, like a wounded animal, clamping his hand over his mouth so as not to scream, not to howl. Igor snorted, without looking up from his knife. "This professor is jumpy, not used to it. It's nothing. The mountains heal. Put your head on straight better than any doctor." Pavel, without raising his eyes, mumbled, "Maybe that's enough?" Enough what, Pasha? Igor drawled lazily. Life? It's simple here, boy. Either you're a predator or you're prey. Your friend made his choice when he lost the map and compass. Now his woman is making hers. For him. It's all fair. Time stopped. Every second stretched into torture. Andrei didn't know how much time had passed. 1 hour, 2, an eternity. He just sat, numb, and listened. Listened to his world die. And then, the curtain was pulled aside. Marina appeared in the opening. She was calm. Too calm. Her face was like a mask, carved from ivory. She walked past Andrei, not honoring him with a glance, and lay down on their bunk, turning her face to the wall. The silence in the hut became deafening. Andrei, trembling all over, crawled toward her. Marina, Marinochka. What did he? She turned slowly. Her eyes were empty, like 2 shards of gray, frozen sky. She was looking right through him. Go to sleep, she said in a flat, lifeless voice. You're safe now. The morning was blindingly white and merciless. The sun reflected off the snow, making the eyes water. After a meager breakfast of a handful of hardtack and a mug of boiled water, Victor, brisk and refreshed, approached Andrei. In his hand, he held a large, greasy piece of dried meat, a real treasure by their standards. Eat, hero, he said loudly, for all to hear. Get your strength back. Your wife is a trooper, pure gold, not a woman. She thinks about the collective, about all of us. He placed the meat in Andrei's numb hand. Everyone watched this scene. The humiliated husband receiving a handout for his wife. Andrei stood, holding this piece like a hot coal. He couldn't eat it, but he didn't dare throw it away. The evening brought a new spiral to the nightmare. When everyone was getting ready for bed, Igor approached Marina, who was staring into the fire. He leaned in and said quietly, but loud enough for Andrei to hear. Victor said it's my turn now to discuss your husband's behavior. He said everything has to be fair. Marina didn't flinch. She slowly raised her head. Her gaze slid over Igor's face, then moved to Andrei, who had frozen on his bunk, straining to hear. She looked at her husband for a long time, a few seconds. In her eyes, there was no question, no plea, only a cold, detached acknowledgement of the fact. Then she looked back at Igor and silently nodded. Marina's nod was silent, almost imperceptible, but in the deafening silence of the hut, it rang out louder than a gunshot. It was a signal, the end of the old world and the beginning of a terrifying new order. Igor, not hiding his triumphant grin, turned and passed behind the curtain, into the room that had now become the center of their universe. And then the hell began. A hell that stretched on for long winter weeks. The night shifts became a routine, a banality. At first, it was just Victor and Igor. They established a clear, military-like schedule, as if it were guard duty. Then came the issue of food, or rather, the lack of it. The last cans had been eaten, only a handful of grains, and a few pieces of dried meat remained, which Victor distributed personally, like a high priest doling out holy gifts. And in this new world, Andrei found his place, the lowest one. He transformed into a servant, an errand boy, a shadow. He did everything to be invisible, to not provoke anger. He woke up first, lit the stove, carried water, chopped wood, cleaned the pots. He did this silently, with his head bowed, trying to earn his right to exist. He was no longer Marina's husband. He was her servant and the servant of her new protectors. The morning would begin with mockery. Victor, lounging by the stove, would lazily give him orders. Professor, tea, and make it strong, and bring it here. I don't plan on getting out of bed. And Andrei, stumbling, would run to obey. He would brew the tea, pour it into the only clean mug, and on a tray made from a piece of bark bring it to Victor, who upon receiving the mug might intentionally spill the hot drink on his hands. Oh, sorry, Professor. Clumsy hands. Go and make it again, and faster. Marina observed this in silence. She no longer tried to defend him. She had adapted. She was playing her own game. Sometimes, her game was more terrifying than Victor's cruelty. Andrei, bring water, she would say in a flat, calm voice. Victor is thirsty. And that phrase, "Victor wants," spoken by her lips, was worse for Andrei than any blow. He saw her sitting next to Victor, saw him place his hand proprietorially on her knee, and she didn't even notice. She had learned to disconnect. Her body was here, in this filthy, frozen hut, but her soul was somewhere far away. One night, when a particularly fierce blizzard raged outside, Andrei was not asleep. He lay staring into the darkness and listening. He heard hungry Pavel tossing and turning on his bunk, his friend. He heard the measured breathing of the sleeping Sergei. He heard Victor and Marina talking quietly in the next room. Then he heard footsteps. Someone got up. It was Pavel. He tiptoed toward the door of Marina's room. Andrei froze. He sat up on his bunk. "Pasha," he whispered. "Pasha, no." Pavel started, turned around. In the semi-darkness, his face was pale and frightened. "Quiet. You'll wake everyone." "Pasha, you're my friend. What we, Andrei? What we? We ended back on the bridge. You can't protect your woman, so what do you expect from others?" Victor said. "He said that if I'm not a man, I won't see a single portion of food, and I want to eat. Do you understand? To eat. It's every man for himself here, Andrei, sorry." He turned and slipped behind the curtain. Andrei remained sitting, numb. His friend's betrayal proved to be more painful and humiliating than his enemy's cruelty. He understood that he had no friends left. Then the situation worsened even more. Hunger was driving people mad. Fights broke out. Sergei and Igor almost came to blows over the last piece of hardtack. Victor broke them up. His face was grim. He understood that the pack was one step away from revolt, and he made a decision. In the evening, he gathered them all. "All right, men. Enough tearing at each other like jackals. What's the fight about? About food, about attention. It's all nonsense. We are a collective, a family. And in a family everything must be fair, brotherly. She is the only one we have, which means the care for her must also be shared. And the reward as well, so that no one is upset." He said this calmly, rationally, as if he were proposing a new, more equitable method of distributing firewood. Andrei listened, and his hair stood on end with horror. He understood that the worst was about to begin, and it began. That night they all came together, except for Sergei. Andrei hid in the furthest corner, covered his head with his hands, and prayed to lose consciousness, to die, to simply stop hearing. He heard laughter, crude jokes, Marina's quiet and lifeless voice, saying only one word: "Next." He didn't know how he survived that night. In the morning, he looked like a living corpse. He avoided looking at Marina, at his former friends. He simply existed, like a stone, like a piece of wood. Sergei was the last bastion of his old world. He was the only one who didn't take part in it. He walked around gloomy, gaunt, and always averted his gaze. But his wall also crumbled. A few days later, as Andrei was sitting by the cold stove, Sergei approached him. He was trembling. "Andrei, listen, I can't anymore." He spoke quickly, incoherently. Victor said, he said that whoever is not with them is against them. He said the weak have no place here. He looks at me, Andrei, the same way he looks at you. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of death. Either I'm with them, or they'll do the same thing to me as they do to you. Forgive me. Forgive me, if you can." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and, without looking back, walked towards the others, who were standing in a circle, whispering about something. He sat down next to them. He had made his choice. Andrei was left alone, in an absolute, deafening solitude, surrounded by people who had once been his friends and the woman who had once been his wife. He was an outsider, superfluous. He was a nobody. It wasn't just Andrei who broke. Time itself broke. The days blurred into an endless gray nightmare, where the only events were the humiliating distributions of food and the onset of night. But man is a creature that gets used to anything, and they got used even to this. The atmosphere in the hut changed. The initial animalistic tension was replaced by a kind of sinister, perverse familiarity. Marina was no longer a silent shadow. She adapted. She learned not only to survive, but to live in this new reality. She started to talk, to joke. She understood that this was her only chance to become one of them in this wolf pack. One evening, while Victor was cleaning his rifle, she sat next to him and watched. "Victor, are you always so serious? Or did the mountains make you so surly?" Victor, without looking up, snorted. "In my line of work, Marinochka, extra emotions are extra weight, just like a conscience. The less you carry on you, the easier it is to walk." "But I think you're wrong," she smiled slyly. "A smile saves energy, and we're already running a deficit. You need to pace yourself." Igor, who was sitting nearby, burst out laughing. "Hear that, Commander? She's right. Don't overwork yourself. We still need you in good shape." Even Sergei and Pavel, Andrei's former friends, allowed themselves weak, fawning smiles. Marina became the center of their small universe. She was their common concern, their main topic of discussion. And Andrei was their common misunderstanding. He sat in his corner, as always, trying to be invisible. He heard their laughter, and every burst echoed in him like physical pain. He looked at his wife, who spoke so easily and casually with these creatures. She was alive, she was communicating, and he was dead. Sometimes they paid attention to him. That was worse than complete oblivion. Victor, when in a good mood, liked to give him life lessons. "Listen, Professor, you keep souring, but it's pointless. You have to cherish the moment. Your wife is a rock, she won't perish, and she's pulling you along with her. Anyone else in her place would have given up long ago, but she's fighting. Learn while I'm around. A woman respects strength. If not yours, then someone else's. For her, the main thing is to have a wall. But what's that wall made of? Stone or other people's hopes? She doesn't care. And I'll tell you this, Andrei," Igor would chime in, stroking his beard. "Don't think too much. Thinking is harmful. It ruins the appetite. Better keep yourself busy. Here, for example, bring me my boots. They need cleaning. They've completely lost their look. It's not proper to go to the evening discussion looking like this." And Andrei, clenching his teeth, would take the dirty, heavy boots and clean them with a rag until they shone, then bring them to their owner, without lifting his eyes. And then one night, his cup of patience overflowed. He lay there and listened to the loud talking and laughter in the next room. She was laughing too, his Marina. And this laughter, carefree, almost happy, became the final torture for him. Something inside him exploded. Reason disconnected. Only blind, animalistic rage remained. He jumped to his feet. In the corner stood the axe for chopping wood. He grabbed it. The handle was cold and heavy. With a mad, inhuman howl, he rushed behind the curtain. He saw them, Victor, Igor, and her. They were sitting on the bunks, drinking tea from mugs. They didn't even have time to get scared. They just looked at him with amazement, like at a piece of furniture that had suddenly come to life. "I'll kill you all!" Panting, he wheezed, raising the axe. It was a pathetic, clumsy attempt. He was weak from hunger and despair. His hands were shaking. Victor, without even getting up, with a lazy, practiced movement, extended his heavy-booted foot. The kick landed precisely on Andrei's knee. Pain shot through his body. The axe fell from his weakened hands. With the next move, Victor knocked him to the ground. Andrei collapsed onto the dirty floor, and immediately the rage was replaced by a panicky, animalistic terror. He understood that now they would simply destroy him, and he didn't want that. He didn't try to fight. He started to crawl. He crawled to Victor, grabbed his legs, burying his face in the dirty trousers. Forgive me, I didn't mean to. I don't know what came over me. Please, no. Don't invite her for tea anymore. I beg you, I'll do anything you say. I'll be your servant. Just leave her." He was crying loudly, sobbing like a child. His face was covered in mud, tears, and dust. This was the bottom, the absolute hopeless bottom of human humiliation. Victor looked down on him with a disgusted smile. "Well, see, that's more like it. You should have started with this. But you found yourself a hero." And then Marina stepped forward. She had watched the whole scene in silence, with an icy calm. She approached her husband lying at their feet. She looked at him as if at a crushed insect. "Get up," she said quietly. but there was so much steel in her voice that it made Andrei fall silent. "Don't embarrass yourself." Andrei raised a pleading, tear-filled gaze to her. He expected salvation from her, a drop of pity. Instead, he saw her beautiful lips twist in disgust. "I thought you were a man," she spat out the words. "But you're just a misunderstanding." He froze, unable to believe his ears. His Marina. She slowly turned to Victor and the others, who were watching this family spectacle with interest. "Do what you want with him," she said in an even, indifferent voice. "He is no longer my husband." And without looking back, she turned and walked to the far corner of the room, leaving him at the mercy of the victor. After Andrei's failed revolt and his public sentencing, pronounced by his wife, a new sinister order was established in the hut. Andrei became not just a slave, he became an object, an element of the interior that could be kicked in passing. He ceased to be human. And Marina blossomed. She was a poisonous, predatory flower, grown on the rotten soil of their despair. She became the unofficial queen of this hive full of desperate, hungry drones. She understood that her body was the only resource, the only currency, and she began to trade it with the intelligence and cruelty of an experienced moneylender. She was no longer a passive victim. She had become the conductor of this small orchestra of madness. In the evening, when the meager portion of food was consumed, she would put on a show. "You know, men, I remembered a joke," she would begin, and all eyes would turn to her. Two friends meet. One asks the other, "Listen, is it true that your wife in the village communicates with everyone?" And the other replies, "It's all lies. What kind of village do we have? 2 streets, 3 houses." Victor and Igor would laugh loudly, gutturally. Sergei and Pavel would let out nervous chuckles, afraid to seem impolite. Marina would scan them all with a triumphant gaze, and then her eyes would land on Andrei, who sat in the darkest corner. "Andrei, why aren't you laughing? Is it not funny? Or have you counted our village?" Her voice was sweet as honey, but it dripped with venom. "Go on, dear, put some more wood on the fire, make yourself useful for something." And Andrei, clenching his teeth to the point of grinding, would silently get up and go to fulfill the order. He was part of her jokes, her main attraction. She pitted them against each other like fighting dogs. Her favor became the main prize for which they had to fight. "Seryoja," she would say, looking at Sergei, "I think your hands are completely frozen today. You slept poorly. But look, Pavel brought me water from the stream this morning. There wasn't even any ice. He probably rested better." And that was enough. The next day, Sergei would bring twice as much wood as Pavel, glaring at his former friend with a look full of hatred. They had turned into her personal army, ready for anything for just one benevolent smile from her, for one single evening cup of tea in her room. And then one day, in the midst of another blizzard, when it seemed the world outside their hut had died, a knock was heard. Not the cracking of a branch, not the howl of the wind, but a clear, confident knock on the door. Everyone froze. There was a superstitious dread in their eyes. This couldn't be. Victor grabbed the axe. The others huddled together. "Who's there?" he shouted hoarsely. In response, a calm, low voice was heard. "One of ours. Let me warm up." Victor hesitated, then drew the heavy bolt. A man stood in the doorway, tall, lean, about 50 years old, dressed not in tourist clothes, but in a worn sheepskin coat and felt boots. He had an old rifle on his back, and in his hand, he held 2 snow-white hares. I saw the smoke, thought the shelter was empty. "My name is Mikhail. I'm a hunter. Egger. The flood caught me and cut me off. I'm waiting for spring. Is there room for one?" He spoke calmly, without fear, looking directly at Victor. And this confidence was stronger than any weapon. He entered, bringing with him the smell of frost, the forest, and fresh life. And he also brought food. This was a turning point. The appearance of a new man, and such a true master of the taiga at that, instantly broke the established hierarchy. Victor looked at him with poorly concealed hostility. He was no longer the only commander. Sergei and Pavel looked at the hunter with hope, and Marina. Marina looked at him with a cold, calculating curiosity. He was a new, strong piece on her chessboard. Mikhail kept his distance. He didn't interfere, didn't try to command. He just was. He silently skinned the hares, boiled a stew that was enough for everyone. He ate, looking into his bowl. But his eyes from under his bushy eyebrows noticed everything. Sergei's fawning glances, Victor's hatred, and Andrei's pathetic, submissive figure. In the evening, Marina tried to draw him into her game. "Mikhail, you probably know many stories about the taiga, about animals. Tell us something, because our men only know how to be silent." The hunter slowly raised his eyes to her. His gaze was calm, but so piercing that she, for the first time in a long time, felt uncomfortable. "Stories, young lady, are good to tell by the fire, when the road home is ahead. And when the unknown is ahead, it's better to be quiet and listen. The taiga can tell a lot if you don't interrupt it." He did not succumb to her charms. He did not play her games. He was his own man. He represented another force, not a brutal and ostentatious one like Victor's, but a quiet, confident, and absolutely self-sufficient one. And then he did something extraordinary. He noticed that one of Andrei's boots was almost falling apart. He silently took a piece of leather, an awl, and thick thread from his bag, and held them out to Andrei. "Here. So. You must keep your feet warm." Andrei stared, dumbfounded at the hunter, then at the outstretched items. This was the first humane gesture towards him in months. Victor, seeing this, turned purple with rage. "Don't cast your pearls before swine, hunter. This one will freeze his own feet. It's not the first time for him." Mikhail didn't even turn his head towards him. In the taiga, there are no superfluous people. There are those who have given up, and those who help others not to give up. Night fell over the hut. The tension was almost palpable. The old order had collapsed, and the new one had not yet been established. Everyone slept restlessly. Everyone, except Marina. She lay with her eyes open, calculating new options. Suddenly, a shadow appeared next to her. It was the hunter. He moved absolutely silently. He leaned so close to her that she could smell the resin and frost from his sheepskin coat. "I saw your tracks at the stream. You walk far, looking for something," he whispered, so quietly that only someone holding their breath could hear him. "You're strong, but you're wasting yourself on the wrong thing. There is another way out, not to wait for spring. Through the Wolf's Pass, it's dangerous. You can't pass alone. In two, it's possible, but only in two. Extra weight there means death." He straightened up and just as silently returned to his place. Marina lay still. Her heart was pounding. A chance. A real chance of salvation. But only for two. She looked at Victor sleeping, then at the pathetic figure of Andrei in the corner. She was being offered a choice again, and this time it was even more terrifying. The hunter's quiet whisper that night became a breath of fresh, cold air for Marina amid the suffocating atmosphere of the hut. Extra weight there means death. This phrase echoed in her head as she looked at the sleeping men. She had received what she hadn't even dreamed of. Not just hope, but a concrete plan and an ally. A real and strong ally. From that moment, everything changed. Marina seemed to put on a new mask. The cynical, sarcastic queen of the hive disappeared. A quiet, submissive, almost old-fashioned woman appeared. She no longer joked or incited the men. All her attention, all her care was now directed towards one man, towards Mikhail. In the morning, when they were dividing the remnants of yesterday's hare meat, she took her portion and in front of everyone, silently moved the best piece into the hunter's bowl. "You need this more, Mikhail. You expend energy. You protect us." Victor, who had already reached for that piece, froze. His face hardened. He said nothing, but evil, jealous lights flickered in his eyes. During the day, when Mikhail was mending his old, holy felt boots, she sat down next to him. "Let me. I'll do it better. My fingers are thinner." And she, taking the needle and thread from his hands, set to work with such diligence, as if she were mending a ball gown. They talked a lot, or rather, he mainly talked, and she listened. He told her about the habits of animals, how to find the way by the stars, how to distinguish edible moss from poisonous. He talked about survival, and she absorbed his every word like a sponge. The other men watched this with silent amazement. Sergei and Pavel saw in this the birth of a new alliance and hoped that the strong hunter would somehow change their slave status. Igor, Victor's partner, sensed that his commander was losing control and looked nervously at him, then at the new pair. And Victor was furious. He was no longer the center of the universe. He was a dethroned tyrant, forced to watch his former concubine find a new, stronger protector. He tried to jab at him, but his words bounced off the hunter's impenetrable calm. "What's wrong, Hunter? Decided to get yourself an assistant? Be careful. Women in the taiga are a burden. Today she sews your socks, and tomorrow she'll stick a knife in your back if you give her a smaller ration." Mikhail, without stopping sharpening his knife, answered calmly, "A good dog doesn't betray its master. The main thing is to feed it right and not beat it for no reason." This casually thrown phrase was a slap in the face. Everyone understood what dog and what master was being referred to. Victor turned red but remained silent. He understood that the power was not on his side now. The hunter had a rifle and many years of survival experience. At night, when everyone seemed to be asleep, Marina and Mikhail met in the darkest corner of the hut. "We need more meat," the hunter whispered. "Without a good supply of dried meat, we won't make it. The journey through the pass will take at least a week." "I know," she replied just as quietly. "I'll arrange everything." The next day, she approached Victor. He was sitting alone, staring gloomily into the fire, resembling a thundercloud. She sat down next to him, so close that he felt her body heat. "Victor." Her voice was honey-sweet and insinuating as a snake's hiss. "I see you're upset, and I understand you." He was silent, not even turning his head. "But understand, he's old, he has a rifle, he has some supplies. As long as we're here, we have to be friends with him. It's just a tactic. He's a stranger. He came and he'll leave. And we've been here from the beginning, and you are the boss here. You proved it." She paused, letting the words seep into his wounded ego. "He boasts about his hares. He thinks he's the master of the taiga. But a hare is prey for weaklings. A real man, a real master, takes bigger prey." She looked him straight in the eye. "Prove it to him. Prove to all of us who the real leader is here. Kill a big moose, so we have meat for everyone until spring. So he understands that his 2 hares are child's play compared to your hunt. So he understands who the real master is here." The flattery, crude and direct, worked impeccably. It was a direct challenge to his male pride. He looked at her, and in his eyes, instead of anger, a passionate fire ignited. "You think I can't? I'll take down that moose with my bare hands." The next day, he prepared for the hunt. He took the best equipment, the cartridges he had saved, a good knife. He was going alone, so all the glory would be his alone. He wanted to return in triumph, to lay the huge moose heart at Marina's feet, and to prove who was boss. He waved to her from the edge of the forest. She smiled back sadly. As soon as his figure disappeared behind the trees, everything in the hut changed. Mikhail, calmly, without haste, approached the door and dropped the heavy wooden bar. The clang of metal in the dead silence rang out like a gunshot. Sergei, Pavel, and Igor jumped to their feet. "What are you doing? Why did you lock it?" The hunter slowly turned to them. His face was calm and impenetrable. "So they don't get in the way," he said. He looked at Marina, who was standing nearby, as calm as he was. "We have 2 days." The clang of the bar echoed like a death knell. Sergei, Pavel, and Igor huddled together in the middle of the hut, their faces contorted with fear. "What are you doing? Open up. Victor will be back. He'll bury us all here. He'll skin you alive." Pavel, the most cowardly of them all, began to tremble and babbled, "I'm not with you. I didn't know anything. I'll tell him everything." Mikhail looked at them without any expression, as at annoying buzzing flies. He silently took a flat metal flask from his breast. The smell of alcohol hit their nostrils, overpowering the stale smell of smoke and unwashed bodies. "Calm down." His voice was even and quiet, which made it even more terrifying. "Getting worked up is an extra expenditure of energy, and we'll still need it. We'd better drink to Victor's successful hunt." He took several tin mugs from his backpack and began to pour the alcohol. This proposal was so absurd and out of place that for a moment all 3 fell silent, staring at him in bewilderment. Are you crazy? Sergei stammered. What hunt? What are we drinking to? The most ordinary kind, the hunter shrugged. The man went after the beast. One of them will return, the other won't. In any case, the event must be marked. Drink. Warm yourselves. There was a hypnotic confidence in his words. Or perhaps it was simply the sight of the alcohol, which they hadn't tasted in many weeks, that acted on their tormented bodies. Hesitantly, they took the mugs. Igor, being closest to Victor, initially refused, but seeing Sergei and Pavel already raising their mugs to their lips, he couldn't resist. Thirst and fear proved stronger than loyalty. They drank greedily, in large gulps, as if it were water. Everyone except for Andrei, who had hidden in the darkest corner and was watching what was happening with the horror of the condemned, and Marina, who stood next to the hunter, calm and impenetrable. The alcohol hit their heads almost instantly. But it was a strange, heavy wave, not one that cheered, but one that put them to sleep. Something's making me sleepy, Sergei muttered, trying to focus his gaze. Your moonshine is strong, hunter. Pavel was already nodding off, his head dropping to his chest. Igor tried to get up, but his legs gave way, and he collapsed heavily back onto the bench. What? What did you put in it, you bastard? Just some calming herbs, Mikhail replied, taking their empty mugs. I told you, it's harmful to get worked up, but this way, you'll sleep, you'll rest, you'll need your strength. 10 minutes later, all three were sleeping a dead sleep. They lay in unnatural broken positions. Their faces were pale and serene. A sinister silence fell over the hut. Mikhail turned to Marina. She stood and looked at the sleeping bodies of the men who just yesterday had power over her life, her body, her will. There was no hatred on her face, no triumph, just a cold, detached thoughtfulness. Now you decide. The hunter's voice was quiet, but firm as steel. We leave at dawn. We can't carry them with us and we can't leave them here. In a day or two they will wake up. Victor might return sooner. They will tell him everything. He will follow our tracks. He's a good tracker. In the mountains, he'll catch up with us in a day. Marina was silent. She looked at Sergei's face. He had once been her husband's best friend. They used to go to the movies together, celebrate holidays. Then her gaze shifted to Pavel, then to Igor. She was weighing their lives on an invisible scale, and on the other side was her own life and freedom. It's your burden, not mine, the hunter continued, as if reading her thoughts. I gave you a chance, but you can only pass through the pass with light baggage, without a past. Are you ready to get rid of your past? Marina slowly, very slowly, nodded. But she didn't do anything herself. She turned and looked into the dark corner where Andrei sat, almost without breathing. He had seen everything, heard everything, and understood everything. She approached him. He pressed himself against the wall. His eyes were wide with terror. She squatted down in front of him. She didn't threaten him, didn't order him. She spoke to him quietly, almost tenderly, as one speaks to a sick child. Andrei, look at me. He raised a mad, hunted gaze to her. You wanted to be a man. You wanted to protect me. Remember? You failed then. But now you have a chance. She took the hunter's heavy, sharp hunting knife from the table and placed the cold handle in his trembling, limp hand. His fingers wouldn't close, and she had to clench them around the handle herself. They took everything from you. Your honor, your pride, your wife. That's not right. It shouldn't be like this. We need to put everything back in its place, restore justice. 3 people are walking through the endless snow-covered pass. In front, breaking the trail, steps Mikhail. Behind him is Marina. They move like a well-oiled machine, and a few meters behind, like a shadow, barely moving his feet, shuffles Andrei. His face is a frozen mask of horror. In his eyes is a scorched desert. He is a witness or an accomplice. It's impossible to tell anymore. They reach the ridge. Below them, the valley stretches out. Freedom. Tiny, almost unreal lights of a distant village. The wind on the ridge tears at their clothes and tries to throw them back into the icy hell they escaped from. "We made it!" shouts Mikhail, covering the howl of the wind. "Now just down quickly before the blizzard starts." Marina, breathing heavily, nods. She looks at the lights of the valley, and in her eyes, for the first time in many months, something akin to a real, living emotion appears. Then she turns to the hunter. "Mikhail, do you have anyone down there?" "Family." The hunter freezes for a moment. His wind-beaten face becomes impenetrable. "I had, in a past life, a pity," Marina says quietly. "I would have liked to see them." At that moment, from behind, from the ridge they had just crossed, a cry is heard, hoarse, full of rage and pain. "And I want to see them. Yours, convict." All three turn around. Against the background of the white snow, like a terrifying apparition, stands Victor. He is alive. His clothes are torn, his face covered in caked blood. One arm hangs limply at his side, but in the other, he clutches a hunting knife. He didn't track them. He walked in their footsteps, like a wounded but undefeated wolf. "How did you—" Marina gasps. "Did you think I would give up so easily?" Victor laughs hoarsely, taking a step forward. "I took down the moose, and when I returned, the hut was empty and locked from the inside. But I figured you out. And you, Hunter? Or should I call you number 47B? I recognized you immediately. I stood watch in the tower at that colony you escaped from. Thought you grew a beard and that's it. You're a different person." Mikhail instinctively takes a step back, holding out his hand. "He's lying, Marina. He's lying to set us against each other." "Am I lying?" Victor roared. "But he didn't lie to you about the flood, did he? He's the one who cut it off, the bastard. He was waiting for tourists, to stage it all as an unfortunate accident. He needed a slave and a woman to help him get through the winter." Andrei looks at Victor, then at Mikhail, and in his empty eyes, a spark of understanding begins to ignite. He sees the hunter's face contort for a moment in fear. Victor isn't lying. "Marina, he's dangerous!" shouts Mikhail, taking another step back. "Let's take him out together and go down, the two of us, as we agreed." Marina stands between them, two predators, ready to tear each other's throats out. And she is the prize. She looks at Victor, mad with rage, then at Mikhail, cornered. She makes her choice. She takes a step towards Victor. "Victor." Her voice becomes honey-sweet again. "You're right. He deceived me. You came back. You are strong. You won. Take him out, and we'll go down together. It will be like before, only better." This was the control shot, but not in the hunter, but in Andrei. He looked at his wife, who again, once more, was offering herself to the victor. And in that moment, something that had been dead in him for months exploded like a supernova. He wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at a monster, and he understood that the main monster was not Victor, nor Mikhail. He let out a scream, but it wasn't the pitiful whimper of a slave. It was a roar, the roar of a man from whom everything had been taken, even the right to death. Victor and Mikhail, distracted by this scream, turned their heads towards him for a second, and that second was enough. Andrei didn't throw himself at them. He threw himself onto the snow, onto the huge, heavy snow cornice, on the edge of which they were standing. He hit it with his hands, with his feet. He threw his whole body into it, putting all his pain, all his hatred, all his stolen life into it. A dull crack was heard. The cornice, undermined by the thaw and his desperate blows, couldn't hold. A huge mass of tons of snow and ice, with a deep roar, started downwards, pulling Victor and Mikhail with it, who grabbed onto each other in a final embrace. The avalanche. Andrei managed to crawl to the side, and Marina. Marina stood on firm ground, a few meters from the abyss, and watched with cold curiosity as the white darkness swallowed the two men. When everything quieted down, she turned to Andrei. He lay on the snow, breathing heavily, and looked at her. He was covered in snow, dirty, exhausted. But in his eyes, there was no longer fear. In them was freedom. He had washed away his shame. "You," she whispered, taking a step towards him. "Get up," he said quietly, but in such a way that she froze. It was his first word spoken with power all winter. "Get up and walk in front." She looked at him, and in her eyes, for the first time, fear appeared. She saw before her not her tamed and broken husband. She saw a strange, unknown man, a judge, and she started walking. They descended into the valley in silence. He walked a few steps behind her, like a guard. When the village was less than 1 kilometer away, they heard a noise. A dot appeared in the sky, a helicopter, rescuers. Marina turned around. The mask of a tragic, tormented victim instantly appeared on her face, her eyes filled with tears. "Andrei, we're saved." He approached her, looked her in the eyes. "Yes, you are saved." He took the backpack from her shoulder and handed it to her. "Go, tell them your story. Tell them how you heroically survived, how you lost all your friends and your husband." "What, Andrei? What are you talking about? We're together." "I died up there on the pass," he said. "Quietly, along with them. And you go, live. Carry this winter within you until the end of your days. It will be your personal pass every day." And without looking back, he turned and started back up, into the mountains, into the silence, into his freedom. Marina was left alone. She looked after him, then at the approaching helicopter. She was saved. She had won, but she had lost. She was left alone with her victory in a world where she had no one left to dominate. 2 years later, as she was sitting in her apartment with her new husband, as well as an addition after the wedding, someone knocked on the door of Marina's apartment. Everything would have been fine, but the clock showed midnight. Marina went to the peephole and was paralyzed by an animalistic fear.